Alright, so we're looking at shrimp stocking, salmon collapse, and eagle displacement. So as we talk about food webs, we have to understand that not all food webs are cut and clean to where there's one producer, one consumer, one secondary consumer, and one tertiary consumer. We can add or introduce species into these food webs, which will create competition and a lot of chaos within the food web. So we're talking about shrimp introduction into the Flathead Lake. So between 1968 and 1975, we added shrimp into the Flathead Lake. Now this created a lot of different things within the food web. The shrimp that we added were also voracious predators of zooplankton, so I want you to keep that in mind, that these are very good predators of what they eat. So we look at this picture here, and this describes to us that the phytoplankton are the bottom of our food web. They're eaten by our zooplankton, the copepod, and the cladocerian. The zooplankton are eaten by our salmon naturally. They're eaten by the salmon. The salmon migrates up the Flathead Lake through McDonald Creek to McDonald Lake, and they're eaten by the grizzly bears and the bald eagles and other mammals. So what we did is we added the shrimp, which compete with the salmon, to eat the zooplankton, the copepod, and the cladocerian. So now our salmon and our shrimp are both in competition for food. And as we said earlier, the shrimp are voracious predators of what they eat. So as we look at this, there's a large impact on the fish, on the salmon. In 1979 and 1985, 26,000 of the salmon went to Lake McDonald. So as you look at this picture here, they started in the lake, they migrate up the river, 26,000 migrate up this river and spawn in Lake McDonald. That's plenty of food for the grizzly bears and for the bald eagles. A few short years later, in 1987, only 330 made the trip up the river, and only 50 spawned because of the competition of the shrimp. So there's less salmon going up the river and spawning because there's not enough food for them to eat, so their numbers are declining. Now this also affects the other mammals and the birds within the food web, like our bald eagle. So in 1981, 636 bald eagles were seen at McDonald Creek to feed on these salmon. 636, nearly 650. 8 short years later, 1989, 25 bald eagles were only seen in McDonald Creek to feed on these. So the birds realized that their food source was going down, so they migrated elsewhere. So they're not going to stay and eat the food. This also affects our other mammals, our bears, our coyotes, and our river otters that are waiting for these salmon to spawn up the river or spawn up the creek to McDonald Lake. So we learned that there can be multiple species in each trophic level. It's not all cut and dried where there's one species, one producer, one consumer. There can be multiple in each trophic level. That can result in competition within the trophic level, which can affect the whole food web. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a food web of our own, a Flathead Lake.